are just $5 more. Your favorite Grey Goose, Bombay Sapphire, and Bacardi cocktails all on special all night. Celebrate Pride Month atop Shamrocks in Tuma on Friday, June 25th. Bud Light reminds you to celebrate responsibly.
One of America's top radio personalities, Jim Bohannon, brings his wit, wisdom, and natural charm to listeners on Guam. Voted one of the 100 most important radio talk show hosts in America, The Jim Bohannon Show brings listeners a unique blend of breaking news, interesting features, and informative reports on a spectrum of topics. The Jim Bohannon Show, Saturday through Monday from 6 to 9 p.m., and a Sunday morning bonus show from 6 to 9 a.m. Jim Bohannon on Guam's only news talk superstation, 93.3 The Point.
The Point is KUSG, Hagåtña, Guam, 93.3 FM and 104.3 HD3.
Now, a federal disaster. I'm Jack Callahan, Fox News. President Biden clearing the way for the Federal Emergency Management Agency and the Department of Homeland Security to help in the aftermath of the collapse of that apartment building in Surfside, Florida.
Miami-Dade Mayor Danielle Levine-Cava says at least 100 people have been accounted for, but around 100 are still missing. She says the work will not stop.
Firefighters, men and women, are working around the clock. A huge task force of people that are continuing. They're right now working. They're going to work all through the night.
Firefighters use their ladder trucks to rescue residents from the top floors, and dogs were spotted down below to help search for survivors. The cause of the collapse is still unknown, but Surfside Mayor Charles Burkett says work was underway on the roof.
Reporter Andrew Scheinthal of Fox affiliate WSVN 7 in Miami. President Biden announcing a deal with congressional negotiators on an infrastructure package, even though he says it's not enough.
We need physical infrastructure, but we also need the human infrastructure as well. They're a part of my overall plan. What we agreed on today is what we could agree on, the physical infrastructure. There was no agreement on the rest. We're going to have to do that through the budget process.
The White House signaling the president won't sign the infrastructure bill unless the items excluded from it are included in a separate budget reconciliation bill. The Philadelphia School Board has voted unanimously to adopt a sanctuary schools policy, assuring immigrant students and their families they'll be shielded from immigration authorities while at school or school activities, and promising more training for staff on responding to immigrations and customs enforcement officials. There's been another no-hitter in Major League Baseball, although this one a combined no-hitter. Zach Davies of the Chicago Cubs pitching 6 hitless innings, 3 relief pitchers completing the job. The Cubs beating the Dodgers 4-0. America is listening to Fox News.
When's the last time you looked at your homeowner's insurance?
A homeowner's policy protects much more than just your house. It also protects you against claims from someone being hurt on your property. If a visitor is injured at your place, how much are you covered for? The smart thing to do is get the answer today.
That's the Insurance Extra Point. Get out there and make something good happen today by calling Guahan Insurance Services at 475-1162 or visit us at the Camacho Landmark Center in Tamuning.
Hafaday, this is Congressman St. Nicholas. Your congressional office would like to remind you that pandemic unemployment assistance is set to expire on September 6th of this year. We encourage the people of Guam to seek out active employment as much as possible, as jobs continue to remain limited, and we want to prevent hardship for our people at the conclusion of the PUA program. Thank you, and see to us, Mahasi.
This ad was paid for with official funds from the office of Congressman Michael F.Q. San Nicolas.
There have been more arrests from the January 6th riot at the U.S. Capitol.
Attorney General Merrick Garland says the Justice Department has crossed the threshold of 500 arrests related to the January 6th attack on the Capitol, and 100 individuals have been arrested on charges of assaulting federal law enforcement officers. A defendant has also been charged with assaulting a member of the news media. Federal investigators have relied on more than 200,000 digital tips to identify suspects. Garland says the Justice Department will continue to follow the facts and hold all January 6th perpetrators accountable. On Capitol Hill, Jared Halpern, Fox News.
House Speaker Pelosi is creating a select House committee to study the riot.
The timeline will be as long as it takes for them, the time they need to do the investigation of the causes of this.
And the Speaker says she will ask the committee to recommend ways to prevent it from happening again. Speaking at the Ronald Reagan Presidential Library in California, former Vice President Mike Pence says he's proud of his actions on January 6th. He presided over a joint session of Congress that certified the Electoral College results. It's sentencing day Friday for Derek Chauvin for the murder of George Floyd, who died while being restrained by then police officer Chauvin during an arrest last summer. He is appealing that conviction. A transgender athlete has been denied the chance to compete for a spot on the U.S. Olympic team.
CeCe Telfer will not be allowed to compete in the 400-meter hurdles at the U.S. Olympic track and field trials in Oregon, not meeting World Athletics eligibility regulations. Telfer made history as the first openly transgender woman to win an NCAA title, doing so in 2019 for Division II Franklin Pierce, but not meeting regulations regarding testosterone levels in athletes over a 12-month span. USA Track and Field saying in a statement that it, quote, strongly supports inclusivity and providing a clear path to participation in the sport for all. Matt Napolitano, Fox News.
And I'm Jack Callahan. This is Fox News.
Do you dread waiting in those long, inconvenient lines? That's why you won't find them at Bank Pacific. We're back to our pre-COVID Monday to Saturday hours with all of our branches open. You know, that where others put branches, we place roots thing. And if you don't want to come to the bank, we have My Cloud Banking through which you can go to the bank on any of your devices, including through our new cool mobile banking platform with remote capture so you can deposit checks from anywhere. Offline, online, no line. Bank Pacific. Where others put branches, we place roots and rooting for you. Member FDIC.
Busy week? Mezcla Bistro in Tumon has you covered. Let us take the worries out of your dinner meal planning. Check out our daily specials or enjoy some of your local favorites. Plus, receive a free kids meal with each adult dinner entree purchased Monday through Thursday. Call 969-2652 for more information or to make a reservation at the Grand Plaza Hotel in Tumon. And don't forget, Jack Larimer is live every Saturday night. Mezcla Chamorro Fusion Bistro. A true taste of Guam.
Bud Light and Shamrocks presents Guam Pride, a rooftop party on Friday, June 25th at Shamrocks in Tumon. Doors open at 4 and admission is free. Live DJs keep the party hot and drink specials all night to keep you cool. Featuring Bud Family and Seltzer buckets for $20 and Stella and Select Craft buckets are just $5 more. Your favorite Grey Goose, Bombay Sapphire, and Bacardi cocktails all on special all night. Celebrate Pride Month atop Shamrocks in Tumon Friday, June 25th. Bud Light reminds you to celebrate responsibly.
Tall Tales with Bob Klitzkie is brought to you by Guahan Insurance Services.
Welcome to Tall Tales with Bob Klitzkie, the only show on talk radio where common sense is a lot more common. Phone lines are now open at 888-TALK. That's 888-8255. And now, The Point proudly brings you Tall Tales with Senator Bob Klitzkie.
A well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of a free state, the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. I've said that every day this week, and I've enjoyed every single moment of it. Today is my least favorite day of the week because no more Tall Tales tomorrow, or Sunday, no more Tall Tales until 1600 on Monday. But somehow Jose and I will endure. But as far as the Second Amendment is concerned, I never get tired of repeating the Second Amendment. It's an important part of this show. The Constitution of the United States, conservatism, individual freedom, liberty. This is what propels Tall Tales through these 5-day weeks. Okay, let's go straight to the Zemi-Ikotni portion of the show. And I think yesterday I pretty well blew Mike Todd out of the water as far as having a show called Meet the Press. Here we go today, and it looks like the Daily News is on a roll. Here's what the Daily News says. We need a real plan to address public health delays at the airport. As the island inches towards opening of our tourism industry, it's important that all stakeholders are at the table. During this week's Recovery Task Force meeting, members brought up the extended processing time during airport arrivals. Currently, the process can take hours for arriving passengers to get through health screening at the airport, as the Department of Public Harassment and Secret Service officials reviewed documents and determined which passengers must be quarantined, can skip quarantine, or quarantine at home based on executive orders and directives. This isn't going to work as airport arrivals begin to pick up. It doesn't work now. No! The Guam Visitors Bureau and its partners just launched the vaccination tourism program, encouraging those who want to travel and who want to get vaccinated to come to Guam. As the program takes off and as vaccinated travelers make their way to the island, their first experience will be standing in line for hours while waiting to get processed. No. Public Health is preparing to launch a digital health declaration process that translates into a QR code that travelers can use. Task force members hope that it will speed up the process. Airport officials hope that there may be changes on the public health side to expedite the processing during arrivals. I see the word hope too often. I'm not interested in hope. I'm interested in results. There's a lot of hope going around, that's for sure. Public health needs to be at the table, and not with hope, but with a real plan to address the screening issue. The arrival screening issue may not be something public health normally does, but it's par for the course in a pandemic. Everyone is having to do jobs they don't normally do, but it shouldn't stop us from doing it well. It wouldn't be surprising that even with the digital code, someone is still sitting at a desk in arrivals pushing paper. It happens all the time here, especially with our government. If we develop a digital solution, then let's trust the solution and use the solution. Let's not muck it up with another layer of bureaucracy and paper. Good choice of words. Let's not muck it up. For example, everyone who was vaccinated received a vaccination card. But then we were told we still needed a letter of verification from public health to prove that we got vaccinated if we want to travel and return without having to quarantine. Why? Why did we get a vaccination card to begin with? It boggles the mind. Exactly. Easing travel restrictions to allow the tourism industry to restart does not happen in a vacuum. From the marketing that drives travelers to buy tickets, to the airline seats and hotel rooms available, to the attractions and business establishments that make traveling here worthwhile, all must happen in tandem. And during this time of pandemic, the list also includes the processing of our tourists and residents as they arrive on island. Once again, the Daily News. This is a real editorial. And they are exactly right. You know, if we want to have a stillborn tourism industry, let's just make it as uncomfortable as we possibly can for people arriving on the island. Let's make sure they stand in line for a couple of hours. Maybe we can work it out so the air conditioning will be broken in the arrivals room, right? And then, of course, the arrival part is still under construction. So let's see if we can make people walk twice as far as they ordinarily would have to. And make sure that half of the restrooms down there in the arrival areas are out of order. All of these things kind of add up and make it a lot nicer for the traveler. So what's wrong here is what in military we call unity of command. The folks over at Public Health would say, no, we're public health. We don't inspect people at the airport. That's Customs and Quarantine or U.S. Immigration. That's not our job. Well, and there needs to be somebody who says, Charlie, that is your job. Shut up and get up to the airport. And then there needs to be what I've referred to before as operations research and systems analysis. How do you take the space that you have, the manpower that you have, and I'm going to use the word manpower, hell with political correctness, the manpower that you have, the tools that you have, in such a manner that you can get the maximum number of people through that arrivals area in the shortest period of time. Operations, research, and systems analysis. Now, the only part of this whole pandemic that I'm aware of that worked well from the reports of others was when the National Guard took over inoculation. Before that, it was a horror story. Old people out in the parking lot, you know, for hours being, you have to wait in the parking lot till we tell you come in, etc. And I understand that when the National Guard took it over, people were in and out in 15 minutes, counting the time that they had to sit down after they had the shots. So I suppose it'd be unrealistic to say, let's put the National Guard in charge of the airport operation. There's a little bit of a downside there. You don't want people who arrive at your jurisdiction to be encountered by uniformed soldiers at the airport. That doesn't set things off well. But it's the kind of thinking that needs to be done. We can't just say, well, I'll send a memo to the Director of Public Health and tell him to make sure that they get people through the airport quickly. There has to be some real systems analysis done to get it right. And if it isn't done right, then there has to be a downside risk to the people that aren't doing it right, because too much money riding on this. This is big bucks. And if we screw it up now, it's one of those kinds of things, you screw it up in the beginning, you may not ever be able to fix it up later on in such a manner that you've rehabilitated your reputation. So good call, Guam Pacific Daily News. And then we've got the Post. Getting back to normal should leave no one behind. My vision for Guam after July 21 is to get back to normal as possible. Governor Leon Guerrero said in her remarks at an economic forum hosted by GHRA at the Hyatt. These words are a welcome relief after more than 15 months of dealing with the Wuhan virus pandemic restrictions and an economy that could have plummeted deeper if not for the nearly $2 billion in federal financial assistance to our local government in various forms of direct assistance to Guam residents, at the same time that our national government was making life here intolerable, according to the governor's testimony before the UN. Mask wearing will soon be optional, and social distancing restrictions and limits on occupancy for public places and businesses will soon be lifted. Guam is approaching a threshold of Wuhan virus vaccinations that makes our local government confident we are close to getting free of pandemic restrictions. Herd immunity could be reached by the end of this month, local officials said enthusiastically. Soon, and that's what our tourism recovery officials hope, tourists will be back. But the answer to when tourists return in numbers like they used to remains up in the air. Still, there's a sense of optimism in our community that the dread caused by the pandemic and the restrictions our government forced us to adhere to will be over. Workers are getting back to work and employers are hiring. The number of unemployed Guamanians still on federal jobless benefits has dropped from nearly 28,000 to 13,000. One of the best moves GovGuam made, and one that for once doesn't cater exclusively to the interest of the local government workforce, is the plan to subsidize new hire wages for 3 months. Director of Labor David Del Isola, a panelist at the forum, said the government plans to pay up to $9.25 an hour in wages for each worker for 480 hours. This initiative will help an estimated 5,000 to 6,000 people get back to work. If business intends to hire an employer for $15 for an hour, for an example, GovGuam will pay $9.25 an hour. Businesses will have to submit job vacancies to the Department of Labor. There are more signs to be optimistic about the future for the island than there are worrisome signals. But we know not everyone will be able to be fully employed and earn wages at level they made before the pandemic restrictions hit us. Some of our local officials themselves have acknowledged previously that the tourism sector will not bounce back immediately, then full recovery could happen sometime next year, if not later. I don't think so. So after the federally funded unemployment benefits dry up and subsequently the funding for 3-month wage subsidy also grinds to a halt, there will still be Guam families that will need safety nets. In addition to the economic fallout that will linger long after pandemic restrictions are lifted completely, there are also Guamanians who need help with counseling as a result of the loss of loved ones to the pandemic. There are also survivors of Wuhan virus, long haulers as they're also called, who are feeling some residual health effects from having been afflicted with the virus. Yes, GovGuam is signaling we are now shifting towards recovery and further away from fear, but we can't throw all caution to the wind. Mask wearing might become optional soon, but it doesn't hurt to keep masked while we're in crowded places such as grocery stores, malls, churches, and other areas where people congregate, because then people will know that we're with the program. It's kind of a badge of wokeness. We can be thankful that we have all the Wuhan virus vaccine doses available for those who opt to be immunized, and our healthcare system did not collapse during the pandemic. We can be thankful that our students are no longer cooped up in online-only learning. But let's also look around to see how we can help others still wobbling to recover in many ways. Well, okay. Yeah, just okay. But when I hold the two up together, the Daily News and the Post looks pretty dingy compared to the Daily News. How the worm has turned. Yeah. So here we go. Congratulations, Pacific Daily News. There you go. Yeah. And let's see, let me check the score here. That makes 61 for the Daily News. Congratulations, Daily News. Keep up the good work. Okay, from there we go to the card. And this is what I've got on the card. I've got CLTC versus applicants. If you applied for the Chamorro Land Trust, or you know somebody who applied for the Chamorro Land Trust leaseholds, you really need to listen to this, and you need to tell your friends to listen. And if you can't, make sure you listen to it online at either Facebook or YouTube. Next, I've got two lawyers, Esquires Thompson and Keogh, fighting it out. Thompson represents medical doctors in malpractice defense. Keogh is a plaintiff's lawyer, so they might actually shed a little light on this. Then I've got Tina versus Therese, and once again, I want to contrast their respective styles. Therese gave a press conference today, so I'll get back to that and contrast the two styles. One is characterized by openness, and not only a willingness, not only an ability, but a desire to listen, to provide public forums. The other is characterized by heaving stink bombs. No! See if you can remember which one is which. Yeah, and then we've got all David Lebowski all the time here. I've got David Lebowski versus a couple of boards. in a lawsuit, a petition for writ of mandate. David, I could title this "David Lebowski Breaks Bad," and then I've got David Lebowski versus GMH. Letter to the editor. And then I've got Bavacqua versus America. What else is new, right? Yeah.
Well, ancient America.
Yeah. And then I've got Brandeis University versus picnics. Picnics is a word that we should avoid here on Tall Tales because it is a trigger word. Yeah.
Really?
It's a trigger word.
Triggers...
It triggers bad feelings and feelings of a lack of safety.
Oh, not ant attacks?
Say again?
Not ant attacks or too many flies?
No, it's much more. It sounds in identity politics.
Of course.
Yeah. Yeah, and Brandeis University, which, has always been a liberal university, but always one that had a good reputation for scholarship, freedom of speech, openness, no more. Okay, then I've got New York appellate judges versus Rudy. Now, New York gets almost everything backwards. So in New York, the highest court in the state, Supreme Court in New York, right? Wrong. The highest court in the state of New York is the Court of Appeals. And the trial courts are called Supreme Courts. Yeah. That's New York.
Sounds about right.
And then Supreme Courts have appellate division. So an appellate division in the Supreme Court rained on Rudy a little bit, and I'll get into that. It's part of a phenomenon that I addressed way back when there was a lot of litigation. And it seemed that those who were defending the electoral process had in their form books motions to sanction counsel and disbar counsel, all in the name of robust litigation and freedom of speech. Then I've got the media versus truth and cultural Marxism versus USN and DOA. And yeah, that's it. Couple of items that were on the card yesterday. So let me start out with CLTC versus applicants. And whoever has the beat for CLTC for each of the newspapers, you got to work harder. Let's take a short break here.
Leah Dunca from Security Title here with a little information about trusts. A trust is a legal entity capable of owning property. It can protect property from issues such as lawsuits or divorce and can be used to distribute property and avoid probate. Many trusts start as revocable but become irrevocable when the initial trustees die. Work with your estate planning attorney to see if a trust is a good fit for your family property. Call the professionals at Security Title. We are here to help.
Get your shot and win big prizes, Guam. The Office of the Governor and the Guam Visitors Bureau presents Vax and Win Guam. Protect our community by getting your shot and enter online at visitguam.com/vax for a chance to win. Starting June 14th to July 21st, we'll be giving away weekly prizes of $10,000 cash and a brand new car to lucky residents who are fully vaccinated. That's 6 weeks of Vax and Win opportunities. Some conditions apply. Log on to visitguam.com/vax for official promo rules or to submit your entry today. Let's Vax and Win, Guam!
We now return to Tall Tales with Bob Klitzkie, soaring over the confusion with his superpowers of truth. Call 888-TALK. That's 888-8255.
I've got 2 land trust articles, and whenever we're talking about the Chamorro Land Trust and any statement made by anyone at the land trust, including members of the commissioners, make sure you have a grain of salt handy, because you have to pretty much take what they say with a grain of salt. CLTC Chair, issue involving land agent reports resolved. A review of land agent reports going back to 2020 reviewed 2 reports containing minor inconsistencies, but nothing that would have affected the decisions of the Land Trust Commission at that time. according to CLTC Chairman John Regis, speaking before lawmakers during an oversight hearing Wednesday. Now, if I were to send in a sunshine law request asking to see those reports, what do you think I'd get?
It's a personnel matter.
Yeah. No transparency there at all. The purpose of the hearing was to discuss the inventory of CLTC properties and the implementation of Public Law 35-112, which amended land trust laws in accordance with a settlement with the Department of Justice. However, there was still discussion regarding recent controversies involving land agent reports, which stemmed from a meeting in February in which land agent accused then Administrative Director Jack Hattick, or Hattickgate here, of coercing her to include an illegal land application swap recommendation in her report to the Commission. In that same meeting, Hattick, who has since left CLTC, denied forcing the land agent to make the changes, but admitted to adding his own recommendation to the report, prompting the chairman to look into the matter. Before his departure, the commission had don't use the word deemed unless you know what it means. Deemed means this isn't exactly true. It's a legal fiction. But we're going to go along with it anyhow for policy reasons. Deemed is not a synonym for fined. So it should read, before his departure, the commission had found Hattick not suited to lead the agency. Speaker Therese Terlahi, who oversees land issues, said a recent letter from Regis indicated that the commission has a new procedure moving forward and that he had reviewed reports going back to 2020, which yielded the two reports with discrepancies. But then today you're saying those inconsistencies, after further review, amounted to nothing that would have impacted the board's decision? And so you're saying this issue is resolved? Terlahi asked. Regis said that was correct. He told lawmakers early in the hearing that inconsistencies amounted to formatting or wording changes. Changing words in a report couldn't possibly have any effect on the report because the reports are not made of... no, wait a minute. They are made of words. But to your point, on February 18 meeting, Regis said to Senator Joanne Brown, who raised the issue of land agents' reports during Wednesday's hearing, there was guidance or memorandum sent out by the previous director on how to handle these land agent reports. So the reassurance from that going forward after that February meeting, there wouldn't be any of that misrepresentation, right? The prior director took himself out of the mix. The commission also wanted to ensure reports were concise and the facts and chronology of events were included and the reports improved dramatically in the subsequent months, Regis added. So Hattick leaves and the reports improve dramatically after he stops putting his own recommendations. Is there a correlation there? Is there a cause and effect? Brown is also has requested an investigation into Hattick's actions as well as an oversight hearing on the land trust program. Stated the matter should be discussed publicly in a separate hearing because these are things that have plagued the land trust for so many years. While the oversight was meant to cover different topics, Terlahi noted that there was already much time spent discussing the land agent reports and that she wanted to resolve the issue. The speaker asked Regis to clarify whether it was possible that a director's changes to a land agent report would not be indicated to the commission. So new process, not possible going forward, Terlahi asked. Regis again stated that was correct. Terlahi asked the chairman to provide the committee copies of the reports that were altered and indicate the alterations and who made them. I have a humble suggestion. How about this? We talked about transparency yesterday with Ron McNinch, and I said people misuse the word transparency. And I use the analogy of a building that has a door on the front and a large show window. The fact that you can get a key and open the door and go inside and look at things, that's not transparency. Walking up to that show window and seeing what you want to see, that is transparency. So how about bringing some transparency to this whole process and putting all of these land agent reports online so we don't have to guess what's in them? And my own examination of they should be signed by the land agent. And you should have a no forgery policy at the Land Trust Commission. Just a minor thing, right? All right, so that's the first item out of the Land Trust Commission. Now, here's the one that I think contains a bombshell. And especially when you go back here, the purpose of the hearing was to discuss the inventory of CLTC properties and the implementation of Public Law 35-112, which amended land trust laws in accordance with a settlement with the Department of Justice. Now, what that means is this. As the Chamorro Land Trust Commission, the Chamorro Land Trust was initially developed, in order to get land, you had to be Chamorro. And you had to file papers showing that you were Chamorro. And the one-drop rule applied. If you could show that your great-great-great-grandfather was Chamorro, you were in. You were Chamorro. Lo Jangin Ti Chamorro how? Ti Chamorro Hamza? He. Taza Tano. There was no land for you. And somebody made a complaint saying, hey, you can't do that. You can't base government entitlements on race. And, of course, the initial reaction to that was, well, this isn't about race. This is about Chamorros. And the Department of Justice actually filed suit. And had the suit gone to trial, I don't have much of a doubt as to how it would have come out. And the whole Land Trust Commission would have gone down the toilet. Interesting question, what would have happened to those who were already holding leases from the Land Trust Commission? Would those leases have been void? But cooler heads prevailed, and the Attorney General got Mike Phillips involved. And Mike Phillips and, what was his name? A deputy attorney general, a deputy in charge of litigation, sat down with the Justice Department attorneys and I think came up with a really interesting fairy tale. And based on that fairy tale, we're able to reach a settlement. Ken Orchid was his name. And this is what appeared in the paper as the government's settlement position, although it had never appeared in the paper before, certainly not in 1975 when the Land Trust Commission was enacted. And that was, well, the purpose of the Land Trust Act was to put land in the hands of those people whose land had been condemned by the United States government. That was the purpose of the Land Trust. Well, that was something that, it was like one of these recovered memories. It took us over 40 years to figure that out, that was the purpose of the Land Trust Commission. So based on that fiction, a settlement was hacked out, and the settlement said this: no more giving land and those lands in the Land Trust Commission inventory to people based on race, the fact that they're Chamorros. In order for people to be able to get those lands, they had to be able to show that they or their ancestors lived on land that had been taken by the national government with the use of the power of eminent domain, or in the alternative, that they farmed or grazed cattle on land that didn't even need to own it, that was taken by the United States government. That was the new eligibility criteria. Not tomorrow, June, So it takes me back to the first story. The purpose of the hearing was to discuss the inventory of CLTC properties and the implementation of Public Law 35-112, which amended land trust laws in accordance with a settlement with the Department of Justice. Now, part of that settlement was you guys, your legislature has to change your laws along these lines, and if so, we'll dismiss the suit. If you don't, we're going to go to trial. So the legislature in 35-112 changed the law. Okay, now we go to the next story. On Wednesday, a public hearing was held at the legislature on the Chamorro Land Trust Commission, which was asked for an update on their ability to confirm claims for those who've been on the waiting list since 1995. Now, two reporters cover the same hearing and walk away with almost two different half stories. They don't get the whole story. According to Speaker Therese Tetlahi, who has oversight over the CLTC, she has received complaints that people who've been on the list since 1995, here it comes, were suddenly told they're ineligible. No! Now, why would they be ineligible? And putting the two stories together, having followed the news along, being dangerous because I'm not as dumb as I look, pretty close, this is the only thing that makes sense to me. That the fact that people signed up back in 1995 no longer gives them anything like, I don't want to use the word right, but something close to a right to the assignment of a lease of Chamorro Land Trust land. My suspicion is that they must now prove up the new criteria under Public Law 35-112, which the Chamorro Land Trust walked into with wide open eyes, as did the legislature. And when the legislature was considering this, I went through the same song and dance. Do you guys really know what you're doing here? Yeah. But here we are. According to Speaker Therese Tetlahi, she has received complaints that people who've been on the list since 1995 were suddenly told they're ineligible. We have received calls in our office from some original applicants on the waiting list who have said they are being told they're not eligible and are being asked to run around to obtain proof of their eligibility. Earth to Therese Tetlahi. Come in, Therese. Earth to Therese. Yeah. Regarding eligibility, CLTC Program Coordinator Joseph Cruz said they'd taken measures to train their staff to determine eligibility. Now, nobody wants to come out here and tell us what this is all about. Our staff will undergo training provided by the Guam Ancestral Lands Commission, which has custody of all the bond files that will assist our employees to determine eligibility for the program. Why would the Ancestral Lands Commission have these proofs? Along with providing training for their staff, Cruz wants to modify his organization to more efficiently address issues of eligibility. The prior director had begun a process, but I think it would behoove us to actually have a small committee within the agency to help figure that out and iron out all the moving parts that we need and how to address the issues right, because there's going to be a lot of research again, and each one almost as we continue to address them. I know what all of those words mean, but no one who reads that paragraph will have the foggiest idea what he's talking about. Nope. I do, because I'm not as dumb as I look and because I've been paying attention. Some of the applicants may no longer be with us, and we're going to have to figure out if they designated a successor. No, I don't think that's the way it's going to work. You know, you have, you know, considering the messes that you've had before, that's going to look like good housekeeping compared to what you got now.
Well, let's just write it in and see what happens.
I beg your pardon?
Let's just write it in and see what happens.
Yeah. So this is my suspicion, that there are a few people that have actually figured out what's going on. Not one of which does not happen to be Therese Terlahi, who voted for Public Law 35-112, right? But no one wants to come out and tell the truth. And here's the truth. People who were eligible under the old setup are not eligible now. Under the old setup, all you need be was Chamorro. Under the new setup, you must prove that your ancestor or you lived on land condemned by the U.S. government, or you farmed that land. And if you can't do that, it doesn't matter when you stood in that line. And this is, the Chamorro Land Trust did this. You know, they approved this, and the legislature approved it. But no one wants to come out and say the really bad things, so they'll let it fester and go on and on and on until a David Lepofsky pops up and says, hey, wait a minute, you guys. What you're telling me is bovine, how did I express that? Bovine excrement. This is pure BE, bovine excrement. And we've got to get to the bottom of this, and we got to fix this. And of course, the ancestral lands was created because the national government gave back large chunks of real property to the government of Guam. So the government of Guam deeded that land to the Ancestral Lands Commission that has the ability to deed sections or parts or parcels or lots of that land to the pre-condemnation owners. So this is heavy-duty real estate work. And, of course, they've got the records. So this is going to be the Guam Talk Show Host Full Employment Act for the next year, because there's going to be a lot of stuff coming out about this when somebody finally figures it out. Now, this person that wrote this story was Destiny Cruz. Destiny, if this is the best you can do, it's not going to be your destiny to win a Pulitzer Prize for journalism. You know, when you see these things, you know, reporting is more complicated than sitting there and copying down what people say. You know, when things pop up that could be identified as issues, if you're going to be a real reporter, you have to frame the issue, and then you have to try to find out if that issue can be resolved and who can resolve it. You don't have to resolve it yourself, but you can't just blow by it like both reporters did in these two stories.
It's almost like a giant reset button that nobody wants to acknowledge is right here.
Exactly. It's a good way to phrase it, a huge reset button. And, you know, all of those people that went down there and stood in line all that time figured, well, I got my place. Well, you don't have your place in line, you know.
This makes for a good story.
It really does. It really does. Okay, next I've got Tina versus Therese. And I've got Tina's letter in front of me here. And to recap, I want to do, let's take a short break here.
Hey, big news! Now you can listen to The Point on radio.com. And radio.com gives you so much more. Local news stations give you what's going on in your community, yet national news from CBS, CNN, or Fox News Radio. Take a break with one of the hundreds of music, sports, and talk stations. Love podcasts? Radio.com has thousands of true crime, comedy, kids and family podcasts, and more. Listen anytime, anywhere. On your PC, smart speakers, and a variety of connected devices. Or download the Radio.com app now from the App Store or Google Play.
Bud Light and Shamrocks presents Guam Pride, a rooftop party on Friday, June 25th at Shamrocks in Tumon. Doors open at 4 and admission is free. Live DJs keep the party hot and drink specials all night to keep you cool. Featuring Bud Family and Seltzer buckets for $20, and Stella and Select Craft buckets are just $5 more. Your favorite Grey Goose, Bombay Sapphire, and Bacardi cocktails all on special all night. Celebrate Pride Month atop Shamrocks in Tumon Friday, June 25th. Bud Light reminds you to celebrate responsibly.
I want to frame the issue in large terms before I go into the respective styles of Tina and Therese Delahaye. We have, on the one hand, I'm going to identify it as the Lebowski position, because David Lebowski, to his credit, shows the power of citizen advocacy. I've said on more than one occasion that the most important office in our form of government is that of citizen. And David Lebowski had a really bad personal experience, and he has brought an issue that no one was paying much attention to. It is now front page issue. And the David Lebowski position is this, that our system here on Guam does not provide for justice to those who have suffered medical malpractice. One who has been the victim of medical malpractice does not have easy access to the courts. He can't go down, file his complaint, pay the filing fee, and go to town. He has to go through 3MAA, mandatory medical malpractice arbitration. And it's expensive. It costs maybe $50,000 to do it. It's time consuming, etc. But unless you do that, you can't get into the court. And David is saying, you know, I've got a really serious case here dealing with my late son, Asher, but I can't get into the court because of this MMA. That's one side of it. The other side is what I'm going to say is the doctor's side. And the doctor's side is, and let's label the David Lebowski side justice. And we have the doctor's side. The doctor's saying, we live on a small island. We're thousands of miles from our source of doctors. It's not easy to get doctors to come here. It's not easy to get doctors to stay here, even doctors that are local, you know, because they can make more money somewhere else or they can have a better life, whatever. So we have to be very careful how we handle the process or the possibility of holding doctors liable for medical malpractice. One thing we've got going for us now is that we could tell prospective doctors, if you come out here, your chances of being sued for medical malpractice are pretty slim because we've got the MAA. And the doctors are saying there's a practical dimension to this because general practitioners rely on specialists heavily in their practice. And if we can't attract the specialists, and the general practitioners are at risk because they're practicing out of their area of expertise. So the doctors are saying, leave the MAA in place. Therese Delahaye has come along and said, I have a workaround here. She has introduced Bill 112, which has a screening process, etc. It makes it much less expensive for plaintiffs to get into court with medical malpractice cases. And the doctors have risen up in fiery opposition to Bill 112. So Therese has been the proponent of Bill 112, and I give her high marks. You know, she's doing what senators are supposed to do. She's been sensitive to the issues that people are interested in our community. She's introduced legislation to deal with that. And she has done what we're supposed to do, as opposed to introducing BS bills like changing the name of villages or resolutions to commend village mayors, or so much of the ash and trash that senators do because they think it's good retail politics, but it doesn't help the people at all. So high marks to Therese, high marks to David Lebowski. So Therese introduced her bill. She PR'd it. She did a lot of public education on what her bill was about. She didn't schedule one public hearing at 4 o'clock in the afternoon. She scheduled 2 public hearings plus an open informational session to help people get up to speed on what her bill is all about. And she's been very open. She gave a press conference this afternoon on TV. More public education. This is the kind of performance that we like to see from senators. You remember when that adoption bill came along to ease the process of adoption? It was set for hearing 7 days after it was introduced. Remember that?
Fast tracked.
Yeah, just sneaking it on through. And we've seen hearings scheduled at awkward times, et cetera. So Therese, the style that Therese has used in presenting this bill is meritorious. Regardless of what happens to Bill 112, we should have a short ceremony out in the parking lot here at the point where we pin a medal on Therese for being a conscientious senator, whether you agree with Bill 112 or not. That was Therese's style. The style exemplified by the opponent to the bill, Tina, is best characterized by this. A half an hour before Therese's public hearing on Tuesday, Tina shows up with a stink bomb in her purse, and she throws the stink bomb out in the public hearing room. Yeah, I'm speaking figuratively, not literally. Half an hour before.
We didn't doubt it, though.
A half an hour before the hearing starts, Tina comes along with this letter dated June 11th that she's had for a long time. She tosses it out. She makes a big deal out of the fact that it is countersigned by 477 people, which sounds good until you look at the countersigned pages and you see that the pages near the end are not completely filled out. So it doesn't take a Phi Beta Kappa to figure that Tina had passed these signature pages out for people to go out and solicit signatures. So, the fact that she got all those signatures, as far as I'm concerned, is meaningless. So Tina comes along, throws her stink bomb out in the public hearing room, front page in the next day's Daily News, Tina withdraws her support. So Tina won the battle of earned media, because people who saw that are saying something must be wrong because Tina was a sponsor and she withdrew her support. And then there's the letter and the countersigns and all the rest. So you have one senator who's operating in a very admirable fashion and another one who's not doing anything wrong, not doing anything illegal, not doing, maybe not even dirty, but doing the kind of thing that makes it very difficult for senators to advocate bills that they are soundly committed to. And Tina was probably going to win. As I pointed out yesterday, Tina withdrew her support. She was a co-sponsor, and then she pulled a Jim Moylan, and she took her letter asked that her names be removed from as sponsor, et cetera. She's not going to support the bill. So I used my political prism here and looked through it, and I said, why would Tina do that? And you remember my political prism filters out everything, the law, morals, manners, ethics, etc., and leaves nothing left but political consideration. So when I looked at through my political prism, I said, of course. She came over to the side of the doctors, who made a lot of noise, because when it's time to run for re-election and it's time to go out and campaign and raise campaign funds, where will you find the deepest pockets? And I use the word pockets. Yeah, David Lebowski or the medical profession, all of whom have deep pockets, all of whom have a financial interest in seeing that Teresa's bill doesn't pass. So let's take a short break for the half, and I'll come back to some of the same sort of thing.
The Point is KUSG, Hagåtña, Guam, 93.3 FM and 104.3 HD3.
The search continues. On Jack Callahan, Fox News.
We're going to keep looking until we find everybody we can possibly find.
Surfside, Florida Mayor Charles Burkett on the desperate search for survivors in the collapse of a 12-story apartment building.
Miami-Dade County Mayor Daniela Levine Cava calls it the most tragic day this community can remember.
We are working around the clock to search and rescue people in this rubble.
Cava says they've declared 102 people safe by Thursday evening. Dozens remain unaccounted for, but some may not have been inside.
Fox's Steve Rappaport, there is one confirmed death. President Biden has issued a federal disaster declaration, clearing the way for federal agencies to assist. How could it happen? Florida's Governor Ron DeSantis telling Fox's Hannity.
They don't have the answers right now, but I think that they will in relatively short order. And we'll have to see. I mean, obviously, there's a lot of tough building codes down in South Florida. This building was built in the early 1980s. That's not necessarily like very old. We have much older buildings.
There was work being done on the building's roof. The president says they've struck a deal with congressional negotiators on a compromise infrastructure package.
But saying it's not going to get signed unless Congress sends it for a signature alongside a bill that's been sitting there filled with money addressing child care and climate change.
Fox's Peter Ducey reports those items to be included in a separate budget reconciliation bill, which could clear the Senate without Republican supports. For Minneapolis police officer Derek Chauvin will learn today how long he'll be in prison for the murder last summer of George Floyd. It could be decades. Chauvin will be appealing his conviction. 3 other former officers are still awaiting trial in the case. This is also the day that Vice President Kamala Harris will make her first visit to the southern border in that capacity. The spokesperson says she'll visit a border facility and meet with some migrant families. America is listening to Fox News.
Do you dread waiting in those long, inconvenient lines? That's why you won't find them at Bank Pacific. We're back to our pre-COVID Monday to Saturday hours with all of our branches open. You know, that where others put branches, we place roots thing. And if you don't want to come to the bank, we have My Cloud Banking through which you can go to the bank on any of your devices, including through our new cool mobile banking platform with remote capture so you can deposit checks from anywhere. Offline, online, no line. Bank Pacific. Where others put branches, we place roots and rooting for you. Member FDIC.
When's the last time you looked at your homeowner's insurance?
A homeowner's policy protects much more than just your house. It also protects you against claims from someone being hurt on your property. If a visitor is injured at your place, how much are you covered for? The smart thing to do is get the answer today.
That's the Insurance Extra Point. Get out there and make something good happen today by calling Guahan Insurance Services at 475-1162 or visit us at the Camacho Landmark Center in Tamuning.
The U.S. will keep a small force in Afghanistan even after this summer's troop withdrawals are completed.
About 650 U.S. troops will remain in Afghanistan for months after the main military withdrawal is complete. The Associated Press reports the remaining U.S. troops will provide security for diplomats and potentially assist Turkish troops until a more formal Turkey-led security operation is in place. President Biden set a September 11th date for withdrawal. Officials have stressed security at Kabul's international airport is critical to keep U.S. diplomats in Afghanistan. U.S. troops have been a constant presence in Afghanistan since the war on terror was launched in the aftermath of the 9/11 attacks in 2001. On Capitol Hill, Jared Halpern, Fox News.
Pentagon says it will help evacuate thousands of Afghan interpreters and their families. The interpreters who worked with U.S. troops could be in danger as the Taliban reasserts control over some areas in Afghanistan. Another encouraging reading on the job market yesterday.
It appears employers are continuing to hold on to their staffs this month. The latest reading on the job market, the number of people filing for unemployment benefits last week declined to 411,000. It's an improvement, though economists were hoping for a larger decline. Continuing claims, those still receiving benefits dropped to 3.3 million. Claims are down sharply from steep losses in the job market last spring. Employers are reporting increased demand for workers as COVID-19 cases have declined, more people are vaccinated, and governments have eased restrictions. Jenny Cosola, Fox News.
Not yet to the halfway point of the baseball season. There's been a record-tying 7th no-hitter thrown. This one different from the first 6, as 4 Chicago Cubs pitchers, including starter Zach Davies, combined to hold the Dodgers hitless in a 4-0 win. I'm Jack Callahan. This is Fox News.
Subway double dares you to take the wrap at Subway. Protein packed with double meat for double the flavor. Oh yeah, this is the way to wrap. Choose the smoky, creamy goodness of the turkey, bacon, and guacamole folded in a tomato basil wrap. Or go for the hot one. Chipotle Southwest steak and cheese tucked in a light spinach wrap. However which way you want to pack the protein, these are the wraps you'll be happy to take. Subway, eat fresh.
Subway double meat wraps are available at all Subway locations, including the newly opened Subway NCS right outside the gate.
Bud Light and Shamrocks presents Guam Pride, a rooftop party on Friday, June 25th at Shamrocks in Tumon. Doors open at 4 and admission is free. Live DJs keep the party hot and drink specials all night to keep you cool. Featuring Bud Family and Seltzer buckets for $20, and Stella and Select Craft buckets are just $5 more. Your favorite Grey Goose, Bombay Sapphire, and Bacardi cocktails all on special all night. Celebrate Pride Month atop Shamrocks in Tumon Friday, June 25th. Bud Light reminds you to celebrate responsibly.
Chili's is bringing you a full meal offer with 3 for Me for just $15. You get a beverage, a starter, and an entree. First, choose from a refreshing Coca-Cola or iced tea, pick a starter, then select your choice of a mouth-watering entree, like Cajun pasta with grilled chicken, ranchero chicken tacos, or the savory Santa Fe burger. Dine in today or visit chilisguam.com for delivery and to-go options. Chili's, 3 for Me for just $15. Available for a limited time. Chili's, savor the moment.
Okay, well, here we are back from that big halftime show that's always so exciting and so entertaining. And the next item on the card is 2 lawyers, one lawyer versus another lawyer, kind of like going to a cockfight, you know, where you put them up together and kind of let them peck at each other a little bit to get angry, and then they really go at it. Yeah. And it goes like this. On Wednesday, 2 years after the attempt to fix a law that requires mandatory arbitration for medical malpractice claims on Guam, lawmakers held another informational hearing to solicit community input. A comparison between the current law and proposed law was provided on Wednesday by 2 attorneys who have been on either side of malpractice claims. Attorney Mitch Thompson, who has been a defense lawyer for healthcare providers in malpractice cases, and attorney Robert Keogh, whose personal injury practice has assisted a number of claimants over the years. The arbitration requirement has been called costly and prohibitive, preventing residents who wish to file a claim from ever doing so, with the average cost estimated at $40,000 to $60,000. Bill 112, introduced by Speaker Therese Tetlahi, would create a new process for screening claims through a magistrate judge. But many members of the medical communities have come out in opposition to the bill, saying that a repeal of the current law would open the door to frivolous claims, rising malpractice costs, and force doctors to reduce the scope of their practices. Thompson pointed out that most states have some sort of screening panel for malpractice claims in order to protect doctors from unnecessary claims. The current law requires a 3-person arbitration panel with 1 medical professional on board who could provide the expertise that a magistrate could not, Thompson said. If Bill 112, it says if Bill 112 was passed, let me reword it. If Bill 112 were passed, he said there would be nothing to deter claimants from going to a jury trial if they did not like the outcome of their arbitration. The current law, he said, requires that a party brings the case to jury trial would have to pay the other side's court fees if they were unsuccessful. Now, that's a real departure. You know, we have what's called the American rule and the British rule. And in the British rule, the losing party pays the winning party's attorney's fees. The American rule is each party pays his own fees, except in special circumstances. As an example, when a statute allows a party to recover attorney's fees, and that, of course, is the case here. So to tell somebody, yeah, you can sue for malpractice, but first you got to go through this mandatory medical malpractice arbitration, and then you can go to court and you can have a jury trial. But if you lose, you're going to have to pony up enough money to pay not only your lawyer, but the other lawyer. Now, lawyers oftentimes, maybe even most times, take medical malpractice cases on what's called a contingency fee. And that is that the lawyer, the client has to come up with the costs of filing fees, et cetera. But the lawyer's fee is based on the recovery he gets for the client. No recovery, no fee. That's the way it usually goes. But of course, no lawyer is going to handle a contingency case on a contingency fee with this mandatory arbitration thing in front. And there's something else that I want to mention here about medical malpractice. You know, our Fred the other day used the word accountability quite often. And there is a dimension, an accountability dimension, that is obviously no doctor wants to be sued for medical malpractice. And the thought that medical malpractice could bring a suit down on his shoulders certainly occurs to lawyers. To doctors. But it's not the driving force in medicine. And it's a very approximate way to hold people accountable. There will be cases where there is medical malpractice, and the potential client says, I don't want to sue Dr. Schmidt. I like Dr. Schmidt. He's a really good guy. I know he tried hard and did his best. The fact that he made a mistake, I'm not going to sue him. And on the other hand, the lawyer says to the client, well, this perhaps is medical malpractice. Maybe not. This could be a tough case to prove. And it could very well be that you put a fair amount of money into this and you're not going to win. Do you still want to go forward? I want to go forward because he's such a fill in the blank. So there's that dimension. Doctors that have crappy personalities probably tend to get sued more than doctors that don't. And then there's another dimension, and that's this, that when the medical malpractice specter is hanging over the head of medical practitioners, the tendency is to practice what's called premium medicine. And that is that a doctor diagnoses someone, and he says, and his diagnosis is 95%, this is malady A. 4%, it's malady B. 1%, it's malady C. So I'm going to run some tests. The test for malady A is $100. The test for malady B is $150. The test for malady C is $1,000. I don't want to be sued for malpractice. I'm ordering all the tests. That happens. It's called premium medicine. And I mentioned my own personal experience here. I'm going to go through it again because it's a really good illustration. I was in Texas, and I dropped a glass, it broke, and it cut my foot across the top just behind the toes. A pretty nasty cut. And I tied it up as tight as I could to stop the bleeding. Went to an emergency room. I got to an emergency room. They did a blood test. They did an x-ray. They cleaned up the wound. They sewed it up, etc.
Swabbed you for COVID.
Yeah. This was pre-COVID, yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Well, you know,
yeah. But,
abundance of caution.
Exactly. Yeah, so they did all the, they gave me a chit for some antibiotics and on and on and on. $1,000. $1,000. And I mentioned the way this would have been handled when I was a kid growing up in a little town in Wisconsin. My mother would have wrapped a towel around my foot, taken me over to Doc Helmbrecht's house if it was on the weekend. Doc Helmbrecht would have cleaned it up, had his bag at home, right? Sewed it up, etc., and sent me on my way, giving my mother a check. Here, stop at King and Morgan on your way home, Ruth, and get some of these. My mother would have said, "Oh, thank you so much, Dr. Helmbrecht. How much do I owe you for this? Next time you're downtown, come in and give Susie a check for $5, okay?" And that would have been that. Somehow I lived through it. Yeah, so that's where we are now, and it's this specter of medical malpractice hanging over doctors that really has a tendency to drive up the cost of health care, because no doctor wants to run the risk of not ordering that test, not making that referral, not recommending that procedure, on and on and on. So this is a complicated area that does not lend itself well to the stink bomb approach that Tina has employed. All right, so going back here to this article, Thompson pointed out that most states have some sort of screening panel for malpractice claims in order to protect doctors from unnecessary claims. The current law requires a 3-person arbitration panel with one medical professional on board who could provide the expertise that a magistrate could not. And, of course, you got to pay that medical professional. And guess how anxious local doctors are to sit on these panels, meaning you probably got to bring one in from outside, making it even more costly, right? If Bill 112 were passed, he said, there would be nothing to declare, I read that before, something similar to an arbitration fund, which Vice Speaker Tina Munya-Barnes had introduced in the last term, would make more sense, he said. Munya-Barnes withdrew her co-sponsorship of Bill 112 immediately before the hearing on Wednesday, along with a petition signed by hundreds of healthcare providers. Yeah.
The petition? The letter?
The letter, yeah. Yeah, yeah. And once again, you know, there's no sense telling the whole story.
Yeah.
Yeah. Right. Telahi reminded all present at the hearing that any registered lobbyist would have to disclose that information under Guam statute. Telahi said that 23 jurisdictions in the U.S. did not have a screening panel, and that Guam was the only one that had required arbitration. The bill, she said, would still provide a screening process. Keogh argued that costs imposed by the current law forced malpractice claims to be extremely rare. Of the over 1,200 personal injury claims he had handled on Guam since 1997, only 23 had been malpractice claims. 6 were governed under a different statute than the MMA. 5 were withdrawn. 5 went to arbitration, and only 1 ever went to trial, which is the causes the doctors out in the peanut gallery. That's what we said. That's what we've been telling you. Arbitration companies were expensive to hire, Keogh said, with one case handled having to pay $10,000 just to register. Wow. That's companies like the American Arbitration Association. This is not something you can do at home. Yeah.
There's no kit.
Yeah, there's no kit that you could buy at Kmart for arbitration. And with most companies charging $450 or more an hour. Specialists on Guam that provided consultations and services outside of their immediate scope on Guam due to a shortage of specialists would not be penalized if Bill 112 were to pass, he said. He said that costs of court fees and hiring expert witnesses to go through a magistrate judge would still be a deterrent from people taking cases to trial if they were unhappy with the outcome of their claims. The high costs imposed by the current law only serve to deter most people from filing a claim at all. As for an arbitration fund, do we need to have a fund to pay private arbitrators to handle cases? The Vice Speaker asked Keogh whether he had provided any recommendations to the current bill. He said he did when asked, but had never received any payment for it. She asked Victor Paulino of Cassidy's Associated Insurers whether the bill would raise the cost of malpractice insurance for providers on Guam. Paulino said it was possible if the number of claims against doctors went up. I could have told you that. Tatlahi closed by asking lawmakers to keep an open mind on the matter. It was difficult to determine what the true impacts of the current law were, she said, but the benefits of it were beginning to come under doubt. There was immense pressure from the medical community not to repeal the law, she said, but something had to be done to fix the issue and provide a less traumatic way to resolve malpractice ways for all parties involved, which sounds to me like Teresa is backing away when she says something has to be done to fix the issue and provide a less traumatic way. Isn't that Bill 112, Teresa? Isn't that what you want people to walk away from the hearing with? So, I don't know, Teresa. This is not exactly applicable, but, you know, given the statesman-like way that you've pursued this entire matter from, as the chief of police would say, the get-go, compared to the stink bomb approach by the person who wants to kill it. I hate to say this, but, you know, sometimes it's a truism that nice guys finish last. If you step into an MMA fight and you're going to use the Marcus of Queensberry rule, you're going to get knocked on your keister really quick. All right, so much for Tina versus Therese and Keogh versus Thompson. Let's move on to Lebowski versus boards. Now, when we're talking accountability, there's much greater potential for accountability with the two boards that we have, the Guam Board of Allied Health Examiners and the Guam Board of Medical Examiners. I haven't spent a lot of time researching their statutes, but they're the licensing authorities, and they would have the ability to jerk a doctor's license if he committed malpractice. I can tell you something about my own profession, and that is lawyers get sued for malpractice because they commit malpractice once in a while. But it doesn't happen very often, and it hardly ever happens here on Guam. I can't remember the last legal malpractice here on Guam. But I can tell you this, lawyers get disbarred on Guam, and they get suspended, and they get public reprimands on Guam when they commit misconduct. And that is a much more certain form of accountability than this cumbersome medical malpractice mechanism that resides in the courts, which has an accountability dimension, but not a very strong one.
The disbarment is more peer initiated.
Yeah, because theoretically one of the indicia of a profession, that a profession governs itself. It's not subject to some government official's regulations. Yeah, so doctors have this board of Allied, as you were, board of medical examiners. It's composed of all doctors and Phil Flores. Good choice, right? And lawyers must belong to the Bar Association, must pony up $300 a year for membership dues. And the Supreme Court actually disbars lawyers, but they've delegated a lot of the investigatory power to the Bar Association to investigate, try, and make recommendations to the Supreme Court as to who should be suspended, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And of course, everybody on the Supreme Court is a lawyer. Yeah. So that's how it works. So I'm looking at a paper that was filed with the Superior Court on the 15th of June, titled Lebowski versus Guam Board of Allied Health Examiners and Guam Board of Medical Examiners. Yeah. And the title, Petition for Writ of Mandamus. Now, I've explained before. Let's get out those Law and Order notebooks, Tony. Yeah, I've explained before that a writ of mandamus is something that goes all the way back, probably 1,000 years in Anglo-American law. That back in the old days, if you wanted to get something done, if you wanted to enforce a right, you went to the king, and the king would issue a writ ordering people to do things or not to do things. And that writ practice got engrafted into our civil law. It's not part of federal law anymore. It was at one time until 1938, but it's still part of our local law. So when you petition for a writ of mandamus, you're saying that there is a public official, or there are public officials who have a ministerial duty to accomplish. Ministerial as opposed to discretionary. Okay, you can't get a writ of mandamus to order someone to do a specific. Well, let me just use this situation here. We're talking about rules here. That those two associations were supposed to promulgate rules, they haven't. So promulgating the rules would be a ministerial duty. Statute says you got to do it. So if you allege the non-compliance with a ministerial duty, you have to have standing. You have to show that you've been hurt, that you suffer a real injury because these things haven't happened. Then the court may very well issue a writ of mandamus. There are two kinds. There are peremptory writs and alternative writs, and we're most accustomed to the alternative writ, which the newspapers always report, court orders so-and-so to do something. And if you read the full language of the alternative writ, it says A is commanded to do X, Y, Z, or appear in court and show cause as to why he didn't do it, right? The peremptory writ issues on a complaint, whatever facts are to be found are found, and the court then issues a peremptory writ that says you got to do this. So here is the prayer in David Lebowski's suit. He says, he asks that a peremptory writ of mandate issue from this court directing respondent Guam Board of Allied Health Examiners to adopt rules and regulations necessary to carry into effect the provisions of the Allied Health Practice Act. That the court alternatively first issue an alternative writ commanding respondent GBHE to adopt rules and regulations necessary to carry into effect the provisions of the Act, or, and the alternative, show cause why it should not do so, and thereafter issue a peremptory writ commanding respondent to adopt rules and regulations necessary to carry into effect the provisions of the Allied Health Practices Act. And the next part of it, the court alternatively, as you were going on, the court alternatively first issue an alternative writ commanding respondent Guam Board of Medical Examiners to adopt rules and regulations necessary to carry into effect the provisions of the Physicians Practice Act, or in the alternative, show cause why it should not do so, and thereafter issue a peremptory writ, etc. That a peremptory writ issue from the court directing Guam Board of Medical Examiners to establish and maintain a website compliant with 10 GCA section 12212.1. That the court alternatively issue an alternative writ. So that's what the case is about. Okay, let's head for Wrigley Field, and I'll come back to David Lebowski's complaint.
Now you can listen to The Point on radio.com. And radio.com gives you so much more. Local news stations give you what's going on in your community. Get national news from CBS, CNN, or Fox News Radio. Take a break with one of the hundreds of music, sports, and talk stations. Love podcasts? Radio.com has thousands of true crime, comedy, kids and family podcasts, and more. Listen anytime, anywhere. On your PC, smart speakers, and a variety of connected devices. Or download the radio.com app now from the App Store or Google Play.
Busy week? Mezcla Bistro in Tumon has you covered. Let us take the worries out of your dinner meal planning. Check out our daily specials or enjoy some of your local favorites. Plus, receive a free kids meal with each adult dinner entree purchased Monday through Thursday. Call 969-2652 for more information or to make a reservation at the Grand Plaza Hotel in Tumon. And don't forget, Jack Larimer is live every Saturday night. Mezcla Chamorro Fusion Bistro, a true taste of Guam.
Need to finish the job or start one the right way? Get the right stuff at East West Rental Center. You can switch to easy mode using industrial strength equipment. With years of experience helping builders, East West Rental gives you exactly what you need. Tools for landscaping, concrete, lifts, trucks, tables, tents, chairs, water blasters, excavators, forklifts, air compressors, and more. Call East West Rental Center at 646-1463 or visit them in Upper Tumon. Open Monday to Saturday from 7 to 5, Sundays 8 to 5.
Wrigley Field in Chicago, the world's most beautiful ballpark. It means we got just 2 innings left, not only for today, but for this whole week. 2 innings of Tall Tales, and we are out of here, unfortunately. Okay, so looking through David Lebowski's complaint a little bit more, he alleges that Public Law 34-79 was enacted in order to expand patient access to professional information about physicians licensed on Guam. He says that public law requires the Guam Board of Medical Examiners to establish and maintain a searchable website containing separate profile pages on all current and former licensees, whether active or inactive. The public law was to be effective no later than 120 days following its enactment. The board has failed to establish and maintain the website physician information required. The Guam Board of Medical Examiners page under the Department of Public Health and Social Services website only contains limited information on physicians and fails to include the mandatory information, etc. So he then goes on to say that as far as standing is concerned, petitioner is a person beneficially interested in the issuance of this writ, commanding respondents to implement rules and regulations as a member of the public and as a person who has submitted complaints or reports to the Guam Board of Allied Health Examiners. Wait, how did I get to the Board of Allied Health Examiners here? Okay. Let me go to the next second claim here. Yeah, here I am. Yeah, petitioner is a person beneficially interested in the issuance of this writ, commanding respondent Guam Board of Medical Examiners to implement rules and regs as a member of the public and as a person who has submitted complaints or reports to the GBME that certain physicians and licensees of the GBME are or may be professionally incompetent, guilty of unprofessional conduct, or mentally or physically unable to engage safely in the practice of medicine. Petitioner has no plain, speedy, adequate remedy in the ordinary course of law other than the relief sought in this petition. So that's the third element, no adequate remedy at law. There's no suit you could file, etc. So that's his allegation. Now, I suspect that this is probably going to turn on the question of standing. Is the fact that you submitted complaints and you're dissatisfied with the way the complaints were handled, is that the kind of injury necessary to provide for standing? Of course, the Board of Medical Examiners just should do it, you know? And it's the same kind of complaint with the allied health professionals, that's nurses and other people like that. And you'll recall that when Lebowski's son died, he really laid it on a doctor and on the nurses who wouldn't be forceful and call a doctor and say, you got to come in here, this boy is dying. So I can understand why he's not happy, that he's very unhappy with these boards. And going back to our Fred, if there is to be accountability, that's probably where the accountability is going to have to come from, other than a pretty cumbersome method of accountability by bringing suit. So, David Lebowski has, I think one thing that is very clear, if you're going to do this stuff, try not to do it around David Lebowski. He's really pursued this, and I give him a lot of credit for doing that. So that's his, and it's interesting that he was able to pony up the resources to file suit here. I suppose he had some money in his filing suit account that he was never able to use. Okay, and then the next item on the card is David Lebowski versus Guam Memorial Hospital. And this is titled, and this is a letter to the Post, "A new car will not improve an impaired drunk driver. Neither will a new hospital improve the impaired GMH leadership." It's a great idea to have a new hospital to build on Guam, but will that improve medical care at Guam Memorial Hospital? With all due, quote, respect, in my opinion, it will not improve medical care with the current unresolved issues in leadership. Not one death at GMH can be attributed to the leaky roof, electrical problems, or a host of other structural issues that have led to the need for a new hospital. Now here's an interesting oddity. One death was called by an electrical problem at the old GMH. In 1977, a patient went into the head to make a head call, sat on the toilet, and somehow was electrocuted while he was sitting on the toilet.
Wow.
Yeah, but that was the old building. That was then. This is now.
Those are like worst ways to die, like
really
tall, forgive the pun, tall tales, right?
Yeah, really. Okay, but I don't want to detract from David's message here. He's saying that not one death at GMH can be attributed to the leaky roof, electrical problems, or the host of other structural issues that have led to the need for a new hospital. The same thing cannot be said for the medical care at GMH. According to the Centers for Medical Care and Medicaid Services, in a report initially hidden from the public until we requested it through the FOIA process, GMH has extensive issues as outlined with its leadership that seriously go way beyond the structural concerns that warrant a new building. These concerns have jeopardized certification of the hospital for years, not to mention putting at risk the people of Guam as patients at GMH. The CMS evaluation stated that GMH failed to have a registered nurse supervision and evaluations of the nursing care for each patient. GMH has failed to provide a well-organized anesthesia program of services. The CMS report stated that GMH has a cumulative effect of deficient practices which resulted in the failure of the hospital to provide care and services in accordance with regulatory requirements. CMS slammed GMH, stating the hospital's governing body, medical staff, and administrative offices failed to ensure that an ongoing program for quality improvement and patient safety is consistently maintained. GMH has had similar problems for years, forever, competing with structural issues, but again, structural issues have not taken any lives, in contrast to real medical and leadership issues that are related to deaths. The hospital, it was stressed by CMS, doesn't even have organized nursing services supervised by a registered nurse 24 hours a day, begging the question, how many deaths are attributed to this oversight or breakdown in leadership? The CMS report stated that lack of proper nursing supervision led to the death of a hemodialysis patient, and that's somebody's dad, brother, son, whatever, who, while undergoing dialysis treatment, was not monitored as required. The report also discussed the death of a 5-year-old boy in the pediatrics unit that, per the report, was not adequately monitored by nurses, and proper use of hospital resources were not utilized. The report highlights many systemic errors at GMH that contribute to the death of patients. All of this led back to GMH's leadership, or lack thereof, that CMS found fault with. It's not just a CMS investigation. Dr. Friedman stated on January 13 in the Post that the issue at GMH is hospital culture, referencing the incompetence at GMH and political jobs by people who cannot do the job or are not qualified. He discussed the poor care that endangered his patient. Dr. Akimoto discussed on the 23rd of August 2019 that GMH is dying with patient-safe care taking a backseat to providing GovGuam jobs. Respectfully, I do know GMH has been told to fix these problems actually for years, and attempts, even if considered feeble by some, are being attempted. Attempts to fix systemic problems coincide with the loss of lives based on how long it takes to fix these issues. They may think that building a new hospital will be the panacea to fix the systemic issues that have contributed to the death of hospice patients. Guam needs a new hospital. It will be great, but the current systemic and leadership problems as outlined by CMS, local physicians, and others which have gone on for years, we ask ourselves if a new hospital will save lives. It's like a drunk driver. He can drive his old car impaired or buy a new car and drive it impaired. But the results, as with GMH, new building or old, will be the same. The drunk or GMH will still be impaired in judgment, and innocent people are put at risk of injury or death unless more pervasive changes are made. Build a new hospital, but hire people who know what they're doing with a history of hospital administration. Yeah, and David is saying it exactly right, which, with all due respect to his ability as a writer, it's not hard because so many people have been saying it for so long, over and over again. GMH has got to be more than just a place to put people that, want to have a paycheck. And, here we are, our only public hospital. So the administrator, and let me back up just a second. I know a little bit about hospitals. I've been in a few myself. I've been in some really good ones in the mainland. Not anxious to go back, but, you got to do what you got to do. And I know what a good hospital looks like. And you could tell an awful lot just by pulling into the parking lot what kind of a hospital it is. A sense of orderliness pervades the entire place. GMH? No. So when it comes to hospital administration, it's a highly technical field. You don't have to be a doctor to be a hospital administrator. In fact, I suspect that most aren't. And I had a relative once that was interested in hospital administration, and I did a little online research. And I found out that there's a university called Washington University of St. Louis. You probably never heard of it before, but it's a well-known university that has a joint program leading to a JD, Doctor of Jurisprudence, and a Doctorate of Hospital Management. Yeah. So we've got one of those running our hospital, right? We've got a highly trained hospital administrator who has a long, successful resume of the different hospitals he's been in charge of, the different challenge. No, we don't.
Nope.
What do we have as an administrator of our hospital?
I think a former nurse.
A nurse.
Yeah.
Yeah, a nurse. So,
not knocking nurses.
Yeah.
She's, from what I heard, a very good nurse.
Yeah.
But this is hospital administration.
Yeah, it is. So, it's like taking a pump jockey at the gas station and saying, here's a wrench, go fix that car.
I work for one of the best chefs I have ever worked for in my life.
Mm-hmm.
But when he owned the restaurant, it failed.
Yeah.
Good food.
Yeah. Bad business. Bad businessman.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So until we have a real top-notch, and you're probably going to have to pay as much for a hospital administrator as you pay for a medical examiner. But, you're not going to get a top-notch guy. So some of the old sayings come up. If all you're going to pay is peanuts, the only thing you're going to hire is monkeys. Or you get what you pay for, and all that kind of stuff, right? But if we're not willing to pony up money for a real hospital administrator, we're just going to keep stumbling along. And the fact that we don't have to pay that much for the current nurse who's a hospital administrator reminds me of the defendant in a murder case who took small comfort from the guilty verdict and death penalty because his lawyer didn't charge him very much. Yeah, so David, David, keep on. You're doing the right thing. You are doing the right thing, and I don't know how the medical malpractice deal is going to turn out. Once again, it's a pragmatism on one side, and where is that paper I had here a second ago? It's pragmatism on one side and fiat justitia ruat caelum. Fiat justitia ruat caelum means let justice be done though the heavens fall. Let justice be done though the heavens fall. And that's what the guys, the 112 guys are saying. Yeah, we hear you, well, you're talking about specialists and all that stuff. But, you know, a sense of justice is so important here that we can't turn our backs on these people because it would be more pragmatic to do so. As I've said before, I haven't weighed in on this. I haven't decided how I'm going to rule. I'm going to wait until the hearings are over, and I'm going to see how many more stink bombs Tina throws into the public hearing room or the session hall or wherever, or if the Rules Committee will ever even put this on the agenda. Okay, I got Paul on the line here. I think I pretty well wrapped this up. I can go on to Bavacqua. Good afternoon, Paul.
Hey, good afternoon. Thank you. Yeah, you know, those points and comments and concerns you just went through is quite legitimate. I think, as many have been saying all these years, I think they have failed in asking ultimately a question, and that is, does the government, our government, need to be in the business of running a hospital? I mean, ultimately, you would hope and think that the services that is mandated by government for its people that it needs to accomplish. I don't know if
well, there is language in the Organic Act, Paul, that said that the government shall establish various things, including a hospital. However, there's a Ninth Circuit case that says that the governor can choose not to establish a hospital, just that if there is one, he has to have control over it. So I think a cleverly drafted bill could allow for a private company to come in and run that hospital. But I'm with you 100%.
No, I think there's even a greater sense of interpretation. To provide a hospital, yes, you allow for a hospital to be established on Guam, but I think the control would ultimately mean, and this is where the government should be the expert in, is regulating the hospital, not running a hospital. I'll provide you the opportunity, people of Guam, to have a hospital, but I need to be the one to regulate it and make sure that it's run right. I think we probably are better at doing that, I presume, than actually running it ourselves.
Well, we've been a colossal failure at running it, and there doesn't seem to be much interest on the part of political types to do anything about it. That's a really good point, Paul. I got to head for Churchill Downs, but very good point, and I'm glad you brought that up, and I will probably emphasize that down on the trail here as we get closer to the end of this story. Thanks for calling.
Yeah, thank you. And if I just may leave real quick, you know,
Sure.
I think our business should be to regulate business as a government, not to run a business.
I think you're right on that one, Paul. Thanks for calling. Okay, so here we are on our way to Churchill Downs, and I've got a caller on the line that wants to make his mark.
Afide, my name is Adrian Diaz. For Pride Month, I encourage everyone to support the ISA Guam LGBTQ Scholarship at the OG Endowment Foundation. This scholarship was funded to help the young LGBTQ students achieve their academic goals. With your help, LGBTQ students who are facing challenges will be able to continue their education and make a positive impact on our island. Please visit give.uog.edu or call 735-2957 for more information on how you can empower these future leaders of Guam.
Bud Light and Shamrocks presents Guam Pride, a rooftop party on Friday, June 25th at Shamrocks in Tumon. Doors open at 4 and admission is free. Live DJs keep the party hot and drink specials all night to keep you cool. Featuring Bud Family and Seltzer buckets for $20 and Stella and Select Craft buckets are just $5 more. Your favorite Grey Goose, Bombay Sapphire, and Bacardi cocktails all on special all night. Celebrate Pride Month atop Shamrocks in Tumon Friday, June 25th. Bud Light reminds you to celebrate responsibly.
Hey, the call to the post at Churchill Downs in Louisville, Kentucky. The race for the finish line is about to begin. It means I got about 6 more minutes of happiness this week. And then I go into hibernation until 1600 on Monday. But before I leave, I want to let this caller on line 2 make his mark. So, Mark, go ahead and make your mark.
Hi, Senator. So I'm actually sitting on the fence, but because I see where the medical professionals are coming from, but I also was reading up on what Speaker Terlahi was talking about as far as the cost of arbitration, and she threw out the figures $40,000 to $60,000, and other people are throwing out $3,000 to $6,000 or $8,000. What is your what's your knowledge based on any arbitration that you've ever participated in or studied?
Well, I've only been an arbitrator in one arbitration. I am a certified arbitrator, but I don't really care too much about doing it. But my understanding is that it's around $50,000 by the time you pay all the bills. You have to pay the company, you have to pay the arbitrators. It's pretty expensive, pretty daunting.
So then I think if the doctors really want to keep the existing thing, then maybe they need to limit the arbitration costs and modify the current law. But I'm going to have to do a lot more reading, and then I'll get back to you on Monday.
Yeah, well, what they could do, I suppose, is get their association to establish a fund and allow anybody who meets a certain criteria to draw from the fund. But I think the doctors are happy with the way things are, and they'll do everything that they can to maintain the status quo. And I'm with you, Mark. This is not an easy question to answer, and I don't want to make a snap judgment. So I'll be interested to compare notes with you when you and I have decided, right?
Yeah, and like I said, I understand where the doctors are coming from, but when you price it at even at $50,000, it's pricing, maybe 80% of the people out of being able to actually sue, even though they have grounds and a good case to win, because you're never going to find a lawyer that's willing to put up $50,000 based on contingency.
That's right. Very true, Mark.
All right. You have a good weekend.
See you next week.
Bob, I know that we don't have a lot of time, but is there a way you could quickly give a difference between arbitration and mediation?
Oh, yeah. All the difference in the world. Arbitration is something called alternative dispute resolution, and it substitutes for a court case. So where arbitration is required, and a lot of contracts require, you can't get into court. You cannot, it's a bar. And the standard setup is that 2 sides in an arbitration, each side chooses its own arbitrator, pays its own arbitrator, and those 2 choose a third neutral arbitrator. and then the arbitration panel decides how they want to proceed on the case, what they want the parties to submit in writing, what kind of oral argument they want to hear. They go through all of that. They hash it out amongst themselves. Most arbitration decisions come out 2-1. Once in a while, it's 3-0. Because when the sides are choosing their arbitrators, they're looking to appoint someone to arbitrate for them. It's kind of like their advocate, you know. So that's how arbitration works, and it is a substitute for a judgment in a court case. If you have a properly conducted arbitration award, you can actually obtain a judgment from a court and enforce it like that. Mediation, on the other hand, depends on the parties sitting down with a mediator who listens to each side and tries to help them come to some kind of a settlement or understanding. And the confidential mediation works like this. Mediator approaches party A and says, okay, what do you got to have to settle this case? And A says, I can't go any lower than $200,000. And he goes over and talks to B, and he says, how much are you willing to pay to get rid of this case? I can't settle it. I'm not going to pay any more than $150 no matter what. Our arbitrator can't tell either side what the other side said. But since he's got all of these things in his head, and ordinarily it's not just one element, so the mediator then has the ability to put all these things together and come up with some hypotheticals and go to A and say, well, suppose we go to $190,000, but he throws in his used Honda.
Yeah.
There's more to it, but that's all I got time for. See you next Monday, everybody.
The Point is KUSG, Hagåtña, Guam, 93.3 FM and 104.3 HD3.
Still digging. I'm Jack Callahan, Fox News. Crews plan to work through the night north of Miami, hoping to find survivors in the rubble of a collapsed apartment building.
They're actually accessing it through a basement parking garage. They're wading through water from burst pipes and working with a structural engineer to prevent the rubble from collapsing on the firefighters.
Fox's Jonathan Seri. The structural engineers are also studying the debris and surveillance footage of the actual collapse, trying to learn how it happened. There was work being done on the roof at the time, and the building was due to be inspected next year, but Surfside, Florida Mayor Charles Burkett says,
the bottom line is that's not an old building, and 40-year inspection or not, that kind of thing should not be happening.
Fox affiliate WSVN in Miami reports a second body has been found in the rubble. Nearly 100 people remain unaccounted for. There's a deal on infrastructure spending.
The investments we'll be making as a result of this deal are long overdue. They'll put Americans to work in good-paying jobs, repairing our roads and our bridges. They'll deliver high-speed internet to every American home.
The plan calls for spending $1.2 trillion on infrastructure. Democrats say they'll pass the items they wanted but weren't included in a separate bill without Republican support. House Speaker Pelosi creating a select House committee on the January 6th riot at the U.S. Capitol building.
The select committee will investigate and report on the facts and the causes of the attack.
The probe, she says, will have no deadline. No word yet on who will lead that committee. There's been a second night of unrest in Rock Hill, South Carolina, in response to the social media video of police wrestling two men to the ground and punching them during an arrest on Wednesday. 8 people were arrested Thursday night. Wall Street Thursday, the Dow gained 322 points. NASDAQ up 98. The S&P 500 added 24 points, both the latter record closes. America is listening to Fox News.